Okay, that's the SOB. That stands for son of a bitch. I mean, state office building.
Please don't talk about me when I'm gone. Oh, honey, no, our friendship ceases from now on. Please don't talk about me when I'm gone. Oh, honey, no, our friendship ceases from now on.
That's not a choice. If you're standing with working people in unions, you are standing with Minnesota.
Come this way. We'll go to the Capitol via the tunnel. We're going to be walking right underneath John Ireland Boulevard into the capital of the United States of America. No, capital of Minnesota. So.
Please don't talk about me when I'm gone. Oh, honey, though our friendship ceases from now on. If you can't say anything real nice.
So the guy in the suit giving my cousin Miranda and I a tour of the Capitol is my Uncle Joe McDonald. He's the representative for District 29A in Minnesota, and he takes after my grandpa, KJ, who is pictured here with Ronald Reagan. He was a representative in the Minnesota House from 1977 to 1990. There he is again. I was doing a project for my environmental ethics class where I interviewed my family about climate change, and because he wasn't able to participate, he invited me down to the Capitol to talk with some legislators about the issue, and I brought my cousin Miranda with me to hold the camera. On the far right is Tama Tice, Republican representative from District 14A. In the middle is Zach Stevenson, Democrat representative from District 36A, and also sits on the Energy and Climate Change Committee. And on the far left is Joe, Republican representative of District 29A.
And her godfather.
Oh yes, and he's my godfather.
So my first question is, what made each of you want to get involved in civil service?
You know, I will say it wasn't a choice, necessarily a conscious choice. My husband and I have always been very involved with our community, and we were in the building industry and just always very involved in what was going on, just advocating for, you know, the things that we believed were right for the building industry. And my representative resigned after the 2012 election, and after that announcement, I just got a phone call. Hey, have you ever thought about? And it's like, not really. Would you be interested? Sure, you know.
So I'm in my first term. I was just elected, 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
I decided to run for this job. I got 2 little girls. They're 6 and 4, and I really want them to enjoy. I grew up in Minnesota. My family's been in Minnesota for 9 generations. I want the Minnesota that they grew up in to be as great as the Minnesota that I grew up in, that my parents grew up in, that my grandparents grew up in.
Right.
And so, the decisions that we get to make every day here at the Capitol have a direct bearing on that.
Yeah.
Let's see, 4th term, going into my 5th term actually, and Grandpa, or I should say KJ McDonald, Morgan's grandfather, my father, served in the Minnesota House from 1976 to 1990, And in that time, he and my mother instilled in us the propensity to serve others, to serve in your family, to serve in your community, serve in your church, serve in your city. And if you're called to serve in a higher office, if the opportunity presents itself to do so. So with that, I've always been into public service through the Lions Club and the JCs and the KCs and the church and through my community, Chamber of Commerce, the city. And at one point, Tom Emmer, who was in the seat before me, ran for governor, and the seat was open because I was politically active in the Republican Party in Wright County. Many people asked me to run, and I decided to do so, and it's been an honor to serve. And why I serve is really to protect, very similar to what Zach said, our freedoms, our religious and civil liberties that we are given to us by our founding fathers and by our Creator. Protect those.
My second question is, are there any environmental issues that concern you presently?
Zach, do you want to go first?
So I serve on the Energy and Climate Change Committee. Climate is one of my top focuses this year. We are at kind of a critical moment, not just in Minnesota, but in the world, about what we're going to do about, if we're going to do anything, do what we need to do to fight climate change. We have a really great opportunity in Minnesota right now to make some meaningful progress because all of our fossil fuel plants that we have in the state are set to retire in the next 10 to 20 years. If we can just replace those as they go offline already with renewable resources, we can transition to a carbon-free electrical sector and dramatically decrease our carbon input without really disrupting our economy. And so that's one of the big things that we're working on in the legislature is can we come up with a solution that works for everybody that transitions that way to a renewable economy. And it's really exciting because, I mean, traditionally, this is a partisan issue, but there's some bipartisan agreement. In fact, the bill that I'm carrying to work on this issue is being carried by a Republican senator, Senator Senjum, in the Senate, who used to actually be the Senate Majority Leader. So he's not just, a very moderate backbench Republican, a very senior Republican in the Senate. And we're working together to try and make this happen. So that's kind of my big focus, or one of my big focuses this year.
I didn't know that they were retiring.
So. It's happening by coincidence. A lot of these are older facilities that are just coming offline, and it's happening also because of the market.
Right.
So like right now, the cheapest form of energy to build is wind. That's already the case. It costs less than anything else. Xcel, hardly a group of hippies or granola eaters, says that by 2022, solar will be the least expensive form of energy to build. And that's why Xcel, you may have seen the news, announced like in the last 6 months that they're going to go 100% carbon free by 2050. And that's just the market working.
Right. That was my next question is I've read, I don't know about in Minnesota specifically, but I've read that switching to more sustainable forms of energy is a lot cheaper for consumers as well.
Yeah.
So
there's the McKnight Foundation released a report earlier this year that showed that if Minnesota switches to, I think they said 98% renewable over the next few decades, it would actually decrease the rates that consumers would pay.
Well, I'll just add, I'd love and would like to get to that point where Zach is personally, as well. It certainly sounds great that as we go into 100% renewable energy, that the cost will go down to such a point that all ratepayers will be paying much less than we do today. In my studies and what I've heard and read and studied over the years, that's almost an impossible goal. It is very important that we are good stewards and conservationists of our land, period, bar one. From recycling to using less energy as we can, save the juice when not in use. Granddad and dad would always say, save energy, save the water, be good conservationists. But to think that we can be 100% renewable by 2050 and not pay for it is seriously a pipe dream.
Yeah.
I hope it's reality. I think what the human mind can conceive, the human mind can achieve. But many scientists and the studies that I've read, that's impossible. Doesn't mean we should strive for that. Now, just a month ago when we had a polar vortex in Minnesota, an area in Representative Erickson's district had no energy. They had to shut off the power. Xcel had to shut off the power, so you had many homes in 28 below weather had no energy, no heat. Because one, when it's that cold, the wind doesn't blow, so you're not creating electricity. when it snows, the solar panels aren't capturing the solar. So there's no energy. So the base load has to come from somewhere. Where does it come from? Nuclear is by far one of the cheapest and most cost affordable way to create energy. We have to have something that has our base load. We can't completely rely on renewable energy. It is almost impossible. And you know what? Hey, I'll be the first one to work
Can
towards
I ask
it.
you a question?
But to think that that's going to be the case and ratepayers won't pay for it, oh, we will.
Yeah.
My studio, $500 a month in my heating bill.
Yeah.
Now we go 100% renewable. Two things are happen. That'll triple, or the government will sustain it
Oh.
and subsidize it, and that's what will bring down the cost for ratepayers because the government will pay for it.
Right.
So yes, Zach.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I should, but I wanted to ask you a question about the polar vortex because I looked into this and I was curious about it. You know, we get our electricity in Minnesota as part of what's called the MISO network, right? So it's a grid that extends actually all the way from Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf. It's a huge region of the country, and all electricity mingles together, and we get it from all over the place. Ordinarily, during normal times, wind energy makes up about 10% on the MISO grid.
Yeah, sounds right.
Do you know during the polar vortex what percentage of MISO's energy was from wind?
Well, going all the way down to our southern states,
across the entire system.
I'd say about 10%.
It was about 30%. Because actually, during the polar vortex, the energy system that had the most difficulty was natural gas, which makes sense because most people in Minnesota and northern climates heat their homes with natural gas, right? So demand for natural gas was spiking and making it very difficult. That's why the energy shortages you're talking about, Representative Erickson's district and elsewhere, was driven by natural gas shortages. So there actually wasn't a problem with wind. Wind was very plentiful during the forecast. Not right here in Minnesota, but we draw from all across the system. And that's one thing. The wind is always blowing somewhere.
But at that point, it didn't work. Our renewable
Actually,
energy,
Because of natural gas
The
shortages.
turbines don't turn when it gets to a certain cold temperature.
It has to get down
10
below
degrees.
20, below zero for them to go.
It was getting close to that.
Yeah,
You know,
up here.
So yeah, so that was one of the reasons
Right.
too, was that it was too cold for the turbines to go.
But when you look down in Missouri, for example, part of the MISO system, or Iowa even,
a lot of
they
turbines.
were making up for the fact that our natural gas plants in Minnesota had to decrease their operations in order to get natural gas into homes to fuel homes. The demand for natural gas was peaking because of heating needs, and they couldn't provide enough power to run the plant. So the shortage was on the natural gas side. It wasn't wind.
Well, nevertheless, unfortunately, wind and solar did not provide the heat necessary for the elderly who were freezing to death in their homes. Freezing to death is an exaggeration.
Yeah.
Not freezing to death.
No,
But Excel had to come in, find homes for them, take them
Yeah.
out of their homes.
that's right.
Because of natural gas certainly was not plentiful, but nor was our renewable energy. And I hope we can get to that point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, lots of.
I don't remember what the question was.
Are there any environmental issues that concern you presently?
Oh, yes. Concerning to me that we're cutting trees because trees are as much a part of our environment as some of these other factors. And it just drives me nuts when people are cutting down trees and we're going back to burning wood.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that we're going to get to that point because a lot of the solar and wind is subsidized.
Yeah.
So is it as cheap as some of the others? I don't know. At what point do we have to maybe take the subsidy away? And then what are we gonna look at? It would drive me nuts if we were cutting down on the trees
Yeah.
just to burn it. And that is very scary to me. It just drives me crazy when I see stats and how fast the rainforests are being cut down. And that is such a deal for us.
Yeah.
It truly is. And I just wish we spent more time on some of those things and talking to some of these folks and saying, we just can't do this anymore. I know Costa Rica lost so much, so many forests because of folks cutting down and using it for cow grazing and things like that. And we just can't do that anymore.
Well, don't forget that for every, in forestry, for every tree that they cut down, they're planting 2 to 3.
Yeah.
So,
But that's a whole different ballgame in that tree harvesting is very purposeful. But when you see them cutting down a lot of these trees and not replanting, that's what drives me
in other
crazy.
nations.
I agree that we need to be doing more on forestry and getting more trees planted. It is on the climate. It's a huge issue. One of the best chances we have to slow down climate change is by focusing. It's not just trees. Prairie grasses are actually great for carbon sequestration. They take a lot of carbon out of the air and bury it in the ground.
Most concerns me is people abusing our Mother Nature, if you will, are not being good conservationists. Recycling, reusing, saving. We're a nation of throwaway.
Yeah.
We throw away things all the time. Last month, our toaster went out. 2 of the 4 heaters. Well, the inclination from family was to throw it out and buy a new one. I didn't want to do that because it goes somewhere. It's going to be recycled. Yes, it still takes energy and coal and fuel and fossil fuels, you need to recycle those elements and those steel. I wanted to fix it, prepare it, and use it again. And I wasn't able to fix it, but I certainly tried. But we are such a nation of throw it out and buy something new, and our landfills are filling up, to the point where it's going to be unsustainable.
Yeah,
Our landfills, our plastics. China's not taking our plastic anymore. What do we do with that? So selfishly, I think, as everyone that's here as a person needs to be good stewards of our land, and not a selfish me, take. What can I give back? If it's planting trees, planting prairie grass like Tony Boer does, and